So, James, how are we doing?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Very well, thanks, Jack.
Good. So this show is called Mastering Business Growth because I'm trying to master business growth. And I do that by speaking to people like yourself who've done very well in business. So please, in your own words, who are you and what do you do?
Thanks. So I'm James Milner. I'm the managing director and one of the owners of a company called Exalto Consulting. For those that don't know Exalto Consulting, where have you been for the last few years? But essentially, we solve people problems in technology teams. And we do that through our three core services, which are recruitment, consultancy services, and performance coaching.
Lovely. So how'd that all come about? Is that something you always wanted to do? Did it just kind of emerge as time went on? Tell me where it all come from.
So where would you like me to start, Joe?
Let's start with your early career.
Okay.
What did you do first? Did you? Most people say, I didn't want to go into recruitment or anything like that. I fell into it. That seems to be everyone's answer.
Yeah. So what did I do? So I probably fell into it a little bit as well. So I went to university. I wasn't particularly great at it. I did sports technology, which I thought was a great degree to help me design sports products. I loved sport when I was growing up. But the reality was there was about 2 jobs in the UK at the time, and I wasn't good enough to get one of those jobs. So I actually left the UK. I went and did a ski season. Loved that. Did a summer season working in Greece, kind of working behind bars. Enjoyed that. Could have done that probably for the rest of my life with the fun that I was having.
How come you didn't?
Because it didn't really pay very well, and I kind of felt that I should have a real job. I also I grew up in the middle of the country, really nice upbringing, but my parents didn't really have any money. And so I have this thing in the back of my mind. It was one of the things that I believe has led me to be successful is the fact that actually when I went to school, I didn't have particularly good clothes, trainers. I used to get picked on a bit at school for this type of stuff. And definitely me and my brother, when we were younger, we kind of had this thing that we wanted to go and make money and not have the upbringing that we kind of had with our parents from not having that kind of, financial side of things. So that kind of, I suppose, was in the back of my mind when I was making some of these decisions. And so I came back to the UK and I was keen to get into a job where I could actually make some proper money.
Does money, because obviously money is such a common theme when people run a business, it's kind of, in many respects, the reason you do it, other than the purpose and whatnot. And everyone's got different reasons for it. For some people, it's like, I want flashy things. Some people, it's like, it's security. That's what it means for me. Like, I guess, we started running our business purely by accident, started recording our own band, and one thing led to another, back when me and Sam were super young. And then after a while, I think we got to maybe early 20s and we were like, should we start taking this serious, and just actually get some security from this? Is that something you feel now, or is it still just trying to maybe not run away from, but...
It's a really good question. I think when I was younger, I definitely felt that I wanted to do more things. Interestingly, working abroad, working in kind of ski seasons and stuff like that, I was like, this is amazing. I would love to do this. I would like to do these things that other people are doing that I never had a chance to kind of do when I was younger. I was never interested in kind of flashy cars or big houses. I'm still not really. And actually, as I've grown up, I'm probably less interested in the money per se. I'm more interested in kind of building something and growing, and actually experiences as well. And I've also got a bit in me that I like to give things a go, and I kind of fear the regret of not trying more than actually the kind of longing or want for kind of like a mansion or something like that.
It gets all philosophical, doesn't it? Like I look into things like that all the time. Sometimes when running the business gets too stressful and you're like, oh my God, I could jack all this in. You sometimes forget, I could just stop doing this. And then you see some random quote about like, you got one life and it's like, oh, go on. It does seem to bring like endless opportunities, doesn't it, running the business?
Yeah, it does. And it's it's an interesting one, and we'll go into it in a second, I'm sure. So most of my career has been working for other people up until about 2.5, 3 years ago. And running a business for somebody else is very different to running it for yourself. Inherently there's more security in doing it for someone else. I mean, clearly if you mess it up and, the business nosedives, then you're in the firing line for it. But as you know yourself, ultimately if you're running your own business, it's a little bit more risky, a lot more risky, and you just take it a lot more personally as well, and like you're never off with it, and there's probably a few more sleepless nights, but I think the upside is much better as well.
Of course. And it's interesting you say, I've never heard anyone word it like that, running someone's company for them. So is that like an MD role you had before? Or?
Yeah. So if I go back to your first question, so how did I get into recruitment? I kind of fell into recruitment a little bit, but I did have a bit of a helping hand. An ex-girlfriend at the time, her sister was a business psychologist, and her partner in her business had actually been a recruiter as well. And she kind of suggested to me that recruitment might be a good industry to try, given my personality and what I was into, and actually would have the opportunity to make money based on your own kind of merit, I suppose.
Merit-based work.
Yeah, a lot of people call recruitment or sales roles like a meritocracy, and in a way it really is, because the amount of business that you bring in ultimately then leads to how much money you earn yourself, and then on to promotions up to a certain level. So I really like that idea. I like the idea of being master of your own destiny. The amount of work you put in was directly correlated to how much you earn and how successful you'd be. So that's kind of how I got into it. And then I worked for a company I worked for quite a large recruitment company initially for a couple of years as a graduate. Really enjoyed it. It was incredibly hard. Nothing like I thought it was going to be, 8 till 6 core hours. So, a lot of the time I was in 7:30 till 6:30 and, working my ass off. But really enjoyed it and stayed there for a couple of years. I actually left then, did a bit of travelling actually when I split up with a girlfriend at the time as well, and then came back to a company that I ended up staying with for 17 years actually, and worked with them. I think when I joined I was probably employee number 7 or 8 or something like that, and I ended up taking the MD role in 2017 when the owners sold out to a much larger organisation, so then I ended up running that as MD for, I think it was 5 or 6 years before doing this.
What was that like then in comparison to what you're doing now? were you given a business's systems and processes, a collection of things like that? Were you given things that you had to follow and kind of micromanage, or did you manage to, or were you able to create your own systems?
Interesting question. I'll take you through the journey. So I'd been with the company for ages before, so ages, been there like 12 years or what have you. So I was a director in the business. I was part of a group of directors who worked for the owner. We weren't a huge organisation. We're probably about £35 million turnover business at the time. Very successful. As part of their kind of exit plan, we were being sold to this £1 billion turnover, privately owned recruitment kind of giant. Part of their succession plan was for me to take the MD role. So I replaced one of the owners doing that. That was a baptism of fire, really, because there were a number of people in director roles who might have wanted my job. The owners stayed around for a year afterwards. That was part of their exit kind of earn-out strategy. And then I was reporting into the CEO of this £1 billion turnover organisation. In my first job as an MD, actually, but into a proper environment, into a huge organisation where I had to do formal board meetings. So, it was an absolute baptism of fire. Quite overwhelming to start with.
Were you able to anticipate any of how it might be? Going from, because I guess despite being 35 mil turnover, all of a sudden you once again become a little fish, big pond sort of thing.
Exactly. And could I anticipate stuff? Some of it, yeah. And I'd had really good kind of mentoring and coaching from one of the previous owners. I think, but with a lot of things, until you actually start doing it, you don't realise what it's actually all about. I was actually still billing at the time as well, so I was looking after customers as well, which actually is a really bad idea. And for anyone who's ever in that situation, they should get away from that as soon as possible, because you can't do a good job doing both. I also had like multiple kind of pressures. I think the organisation that had bought our company were keen to grow. And we did some good growth stuff, including opening an office in London and other bits. But the exiting kind of founders didn't want to spend any money, rightly so, because they wanted to maximise their earnout. And so I actually went to coaching, and I'll talk about that a bit because we do coaching as part of our proposition now. But I went to an external coach at the time to help me through that transition. And I found that really transformational, to have somebody to actually kind of bounce ideas off and actually just help me work through my own journey of kind of going through it.
What kind of things does a coach help you with?
Now, this is a great question. So I'm actually a formally trained coach myself now. So I do exec coaching. And actually the reason I came to coaching is purely because it had been so useful for me. So I've had coaches kind of on and off since that period. What was that, 2017? So quite a while ago now. There's different types of coaches, but in the purest kind of truest sense of the word of a coach, from a business or an exec coach, they actually are very much a thinking partner. They're somebody who will ask you questions more than tell you any answers.
They help you come to your own conclusion.
Exactly, yeah. So I'm trained in pure coaching as well. I am a trained mentor as well. But the difference between coaching and mentoring, and I talk about this on some of the webinars and stuff that we do, mentoring or mentor actually comes from a Greek word, and it's part of an old, one of the Greek tales, and I'll make a mess of it if I try and regurgitate it all now. But essentially, it comes from tell somebody everything you know. And it's usually done by somebody who's more senior to somebody who's more junior. Whereas coaching is purely question-led, and you'll help people, first of all, get kind of awareness of where they are at the moment, kind of understand where they would want to go, work through kind of different options, how they might do it, and then ultimately help them become accountable for it.
Sounds almost like therapy, doesn't it?
It's close. Do you know what? There is a thing. So it isn't therapy, but kind of, if you talk about psychotherapy or psychiatry, there is an element of the psychology in there that's similar in the question led to coaching, but it's very different. So coaching is very much future focused and looks strength orientated, rather than delving into your past and trying to understand and unearth that as well. And they are very different. And anyone coaching shouldn't, who isn't a qualified therapist, shouldn't be going in that kind of direction.
Yeah, of course.
But you are trained to signpost people if they do need kind of therapy as well. So, but it can be quite, as the person being coached, can be quite therapeutic to talk through your problems and try and resolve it.
Oh yeah, I bet. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the hard parts about running your own business, when you have to, faced with a problem. Could be a little one, could be a big one.
Yeah.
And you have to just make a decision.
Yeah.
Sometimes you do wish you had someone there to, bounce ideas off, and, someone who, like you say, is trained to be an exec coach, someone who might know how to make these big decisions. I guess that's something smaller business owners like myself, oftentimes it's just, I hope that works. Let me see.
Yeah.
And you don't really know what to do.
No, and it is a tricky one. I think, if you are a business owner on your own, so going back to that particular role, I did feel like I was a bit on my own, really. And that's the reason why I suppose I went to somebody else. I'm lucky in the current role that I've got now that there's three of us, so there's always a casting vote. So we probably talk through a lot more things together than I would do. If I was on my own, then it'd be a bit different.
I got you. How did you know to go to a coach? Because as someone who's never used one, your initial thought, and I imagine this is kind of part of the struggle with selling that kind of service, it's very much people might not recognise that they need one.
Yeah, that's a really good question. The honest answer is I'm not sure. I think I'm quite open, and I'll try a lot of different things. And I think I'd probably been pitched by a couple of people, and I thought, do you know what? I'll give it a go. If it doesn't work out, well, I'll stop doing it. I'm that kind of person that will give a lot of things a go.
Yeah.
And so that's me, but everyone's different.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, what was next then?
So doing that role, obviously baptism of fire. Over time, everything gets easy, doesn't it? So
so they say.
Yeah. So something that's hard initially, often you find your way through it a little bit. And then I settled in and generally really enjoyed it for a couple of years. As I said, opened an office in London. We started to do things in different locations. The business continued to grow. I was, I suppose, making my mark a little bit as an MD and trying to really understand my style, what I'm doing, actually how to lead people in the best possible way, making that step from being more of an individual kind of contributor to actually truly being somebody who runs a business and actually solely relying on your team and everybody else around you for your performance, which is a scary step for anyone who's done it as well. And then kind of COVID came and blew all that to shit. Yeah. And then that was a very lively time. We actually had our second child, I think 3 days into COVID, which was absolutely crazy. And we were going through all kind of things like restructures and, a lot of, the business was on fire, basically. People were stopping all of their contracts and, it was absolutely crazy. But again, kind of looking back on it, it feels a lifetime away or a lifetime ago. And actually you find a way through it. And actually you're better from the experience of it.
Do you know, that's something, because I've been through some kind of recently, just some personal things, like businesses are always highs and lows. And sometimes you get to a point of just, wow, I don't know how to deal with this. How do you get through those times? Like you say, when the business was on fire and you almost, you get up in the morning, you think, how do I even begin to tackle this? And I sometimes struggle with, is there even any point trying to, which I know can sound quite dramatic, but you just, I don't know, maybe once every 5 years you have a bit of burnout and you go, I don't even feel like I want to deal with this anymore. How do you deal with things like that?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting listening to that. I don't, have I had those days where I feel like I don't want to even do it? Yeah, I have. I definitely have. I think the few and far in between. I think inherently, for whatever reason, I'm fairly resilient, and actually, I'm quite good at just picking myself up and just doing something. And again, this is probably a bit of a coaching thing. Often the problem's worse in your head than the actual reality is.
So they say, what's that phrase? Man has suffered thousands of great tragedies, only a few of which ever actually happened.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, I coach a lot of different individuals, some very senior business owners, leaders. And often, most of the time, the things that we're talking about are things that are to do with your mindset, psyche, and actually approach to things. Sometimes there's different things, but by and large, my own belief is that there's a way through it. And I fundamentally believe that myself, and I'm confident in that. It might be that I can't see the way through it.
I was going to say, is that something you have to talk yourself into, or is it just a gut feeling of like, well, I guess I'll figure this out?
No, you probably have to talk yourself into it and build habits around it as well. And I think the more you go through and the more you get through, the more you realise that actually it will be okay in the end at some point. Again, as well, I've got a very, I suppose, my upbringing, we weren't poor by any stretch of the proper kind of, I suppose, like definition of being poor. We didn't want for any food and stuff like that, but we we were definitely lower income compared to a lot of the people around. But what I actually saw from my parents was that they were unbelievably happy. They've never had lots of money, but they've been some of the happiest people I've ever seen. And it kind of gives you a little bit, or gives me a bit of peace that, if I lost everything, if it didn't work out, I'd still be all right. I'm not dead, and actually as long as I've got my health and I'm happy and, I've got a little bit of inner peace with that type of stuff. Now, whether that's just I'm lucky with that or whether that's something that I've built myself over time, I don't really know. But I just have a bit of peace and calm with that.
That's a fascinating dynamic, that, like, with business owners, business leaders of all kinds, where if you have that inner peace of, if I lost it all, it'd be okay, I'd be fine, yet for some reason striving for the top, because it's even running a small operation is unbelievable amounts of effort, vision, determination, as you say, resilience. It almost makes you think, how can you put yourself through that if you're not terrified of the baseline of, oh no, I need this to work?
Yeah, why do we do it? It's a really good question. I don't really know. I think I enjoy the challenge, to be honest. Like
you say, it's a game. You just like building.
Yeah. So it is interesting you say that. I said something to one of my colleagues today that I do find some of it a bit of a game that I really want to win, and I want to be the best possible that I can in it. And I'm continually trying to improve, and we have lots of feedback loops of how we're trying to do it. I think, again, it's kind of going back to what you fundamentally believe in, your fundamental truths. So to me, I believe that there's a huge amount in this life that you can't actually change and that you have no effect on. But what you can do is work on percentages to try and kind of leverage it in your favor. Mm-hmm. So one of the things we talk about is, are we doing everything possible to actually make the business run in the direction we want it to be? So, if that's on the sales front, or if it's on your customer piece, or if it's on your marketing, whatever it is, nothing will guarantee an outcome, but we want to kind of get it. We want to work the percentages to get it in our favor.
It's like that Taoism thing, isn't it? Where, like, detach from outcomes, do the work, but then don't get too hung up on if it works or not. Yeah. Which is kind of strange, kind of a contradicting thing, isn't it? Like, well, of course I want it to work, but you need to be okay with it not working, because a lot of time in business, things don't work the way you planned. Yeah. And I think it's interesting. I've not heard that before, but I think that is very true. And it is, well, it's just life as well, isn't it? Again, I like my sporting analogies because I like my sport, but, if you're in the Olympics and your goal is to win the gold, well, you've got a very small chance of that happening. And so actually, if you don't hit that, how's it going to affect you? So it's actually then building things around that, and how do you actually build in your training around things to actually affect the percentage to make it more likely to happen, but also being okay with the fact that it just might not. And I don't know, again, whether that will mean that, my kind of philosophy and thought process around that, I don't know whether that will mean that we won't make the very, very top, because to your point, you look at some of the most successful people in the world, and they seem hell-bent on getting to the top, and it's almost something innately kind of driving them that's been pushing them there, if that makes sense. I'm not sure I've got that kind of niggle away, but I love the building and the journey. Yeah. Well, some people say the stress, the focus, the worry that you put into it is the very reason you're able to stretch yourself so far and so hard. But some might argue, if you worry a little bit and do all the work you need to do, and you're only 10% worried, that extra 90% is just suffering needlessly. Yeah. To get to the top, and like, you could not stress that much, and like the actual amount further you might get might just be like this tiny little inch, as opposed to, it's diminishing returns, basically. Yeah, it is interesting. So again, one that we talk about is control the controllables, and then try not to worry about things that you can't. And it is very difficult, right? It's extremely difficult. Yeah, it's incredibly difficult.
but it does help your mindset. And also, again, if you look from a performance perspective, which is inherently linked to kind of coaching and some practices that are similar and around that, it's actually freeing up headspace to then be more creative and actually have time to look at other things that could be strategies, plans, or whatever you want to do with it. But it frees up headspace because you're not worrying about something.
And, I found the best way to actually do this is I've been speaking a lot with a man called Dave who runs the family business community, and he said, you need to know what is a need to do and a nice to do in running a business. So, for example, it's very easy to fill your day with things that busy work. Feels like you're doing something, but it's not actually moving the needle.
Yeah.
And then there's things like maybe, let's say, your outreach or chasing people up, or, as opposed to making another tweak on the website. And it's like, if you get those need to do things done, you might find that you can actually get it done in a few hours a day.
Yeah.
And then, once you've done them, the ability to step back and say, I don't actually have to do anything else today. I can, but being okay with that silence and that waiting, like anything else I do is not going to speed it up. And that's a scary thing. That stillness, that silence of waiting, it's out of my control now. I can't make someone do this or do that.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing you said there as well. And I think this is one that I'm constantly trying to refine, but is actually working on the things that are going to leverage the most in your business. And most people have heard of the 80-20 rule, that 20% of the things you do leverage 80% of your revenue. And I think there is definitely some truth to that as well. But then being able to understand what that 20% is, and also being number one is the awareness, like we talked about it, but then actually sometimes having the courage to do it or the conviction to see it through. And often it's easier to do things that are your kind of busy fool type bit that you talk about.
I love it. It's such a comfortable place.
Yeah. It's in your nice flow, easy bit. You're reacting to things that are coming in, but usually, this is just my opinion, but I think usually the things that are niggling you a little bit, that are in your gut somewhere going, I need to do that, but it's a bit hard, it's a bit difficult. They're the ones that are actually going to transform and take you somewhere.
My version of that is every time the accountants get in touch, can you get us all this CSV and all that stuff? And I'm like, oh my God, I hate doing it. It's the worst part of all of it. But I tell you what, at that point, you'd not quite started Exalto at that point. What was next?
Yeah, so Exalto, an interesting one. So I fundamentally fell out with my previous business. Without going into the actual nitty gritty of it, I disagreed with some of their decisions around some individuals within the business, and it wasn't something that I was happy to go along with. So I just waited for my bonus and I left.
In that exact order.
Yes, I think it was probably a little silly to leave before my bonus, but especially when you're in an MD role and the way that it was that actually you didn't get kind of sales commission or like you would do in a kind of individual contributor recruitment kind of role. So you just get paid a bonus once a year. So you're probably best to wait for your bonus. So I left. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do actually. And I left, and then quite a few people left the business as well. And then, so actually, one of my co-founders, he actually is the founder of the business, Mo. He actually set up Exalto himself. And I had a period of time where I couldn't do anything or join anybody or do anything. So
was that like a contractual
like
thing?
A contractual one. It was about 12 months to be fair, so it's quite long. So I actually did my coaching qualification then to become an exec coach, which was great. Really enjoyed that, and actually picked up some customers off the back of it. Because it's a bit like, I suppose, I've never done it, but I'd imagine it's a bit like kind of if you're training to be a teacher or anything like that, you have to do a lot of practice. So we're doing a lot of practice. You needed some people to actually do your practice on, and a number of those people turned into customers, like paying customers afterwards, which was great. And then I did a bit of consultancy work, helping out a couple of other firms, going in, working with their CEOs and kind of helping them kind of, I suppose, coach and mentor and shape their kind of recruitment teams. So it was other recruitment companies. And then, so I got back together with a couple of the guys from from a previous business, and they'd started Exalto, and they kept talking to me saying, "Do you want to come on board and kind of run it?" And so they talked me into it, and that's where it kind of started from, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But having done the coaching piece in between as well, and some of the other stuff, part of my kind of condition of joining was I'd like to bring this as a proposition and kind of tie together some of the stuff that we're doing, and kind of change it slightly. We at Exalto now, we're very much service kind of focused with our customers. We always were in our previous business, but it probably wasn't quantified quite as much as the way we do it now. So we actually run Net Promoter Score metrics through every interaction that we do with our kind of clients and with our candidates. So we use a platform. It's a great platform that actually sends out automated bits of feedback to a candidate or client whenever we've had an interaction with them. And they rate us, and it comes back through, and we collate all that information, and it's done on a consultant level and also across a business level. And so we're looking for a Net Promoter Score. A world class is plus 70, and we're looking for above that on every kind of interaction where possible. And it's really good because it's automated. There's a bit of AI to measure the customer sentiment, and it kind of predicts where the business is going off the back of it as well.
It's really useful, that, because it's something we don't like to face. Like, actually, people always say, listen to your customers. And a lot of the time we're like, I don't want to, what if I get told something, I've worked on this for 6 months and
Yeah, well, that's one. So again, it's one of our kind of core principles is gather as much feedback as possible. If we fail, you fail fast and you learn and you move on. I think you're absolutely right. A lot of people, or most people, don't want to get bad feedback. We don't like it, let's be honest. Yeah. Someone tells you you've done a bad job, you're like, oh my God, what have I done?
But there's nothing worse than having a load of yes men and then nothing changing.
Exactly. So we kind of built it from the start. And again, I'll give them a shout out. It's a company called Talent Analytics, actually. So great product. It's solely for the recruitment industry. And yeah, I started speaking to their founder at the start of my Exalto kind of journey, and Julian, who runs that business, they were just starting there, so we kind of dovetailed together really nicely. And so we brought that in. We brought coaching in. We also do kind of consultancy services. So we have a model that's kind of source, build, and retain. So we help technology leaders kind of source the best people, kind of build their teams, and then kind of retain and kind of, I suppose, in a way, kind of upskill their kind of current cohort of staff as well. So everything we do is built around that.
That's lovely. So before we get into more specific things, can you just tell me a bit about the day-to-day at Exalto? Your day-to-day specifically.
My day-to-day? It's so different. Well, today I'm on a podcast with you guys.
Yeah. But is it normally that varied?
Yes, it is in my role. But we've got a great team. There is 6 of us, soon to become 7. We've got a really great kind of core delivery kind of function of people who really work on filling requirements, filling roles. We've got somebody who looks after sales mainly. I do sales as well. I actually do a real mixture of things. So I'll spend time on kind of meetings, content. I do coaching. I do delivery if we have to, if we're busy, and we've been really busy recently. So I have been, hands-on recruitment again. I've actually spent a lot of time doing a load of the finance stuff as well. We've got really good accountants now who do a lot of that, and we've got outsourced to bookkeeping. We've had to bring in someone to run commercial and finance, and she's joining next month because of the way that we've grown. So yeah, it's incredibly varied. Like a couple of weeks ago, I was in Milan at a conference. I spend as much time as possible actually customer facing, trying to meet people. That's probably where my biggest value add is. And a bit going back to a point we were talking about before, I try and, where possible, outsource things that are actually that somebody else can do. So if we can pay somebody else to do something, great. And as long as we've got the cash flow to do it and we're performing well enough, and then I should be doing things that only I can do, if that makes sense. So it will be kind of coming up with new products. We launched a new product today, so new products and services, like actually the direction of the business, running events. So that type of thing.
Yeah, I got you. You mentioned there you still are kind of feet on the ground doing recruitment. What are some of the most, I won't even know where to begin in terms of finding the right talent. What kind of strategies are you using?
Okay, good question. You should be talking to our delivery team for this because they are the experts at it rather than me. And I don't do a lot of hands-on recruitment. Yeah. So I've probably only worked about 5 or 6 roles since I've been in the business. What's the strategy? So at the moment, it's an interesting one in tech. The market isn't particularly great for candidates. So actually, there are more candidates than there are jobs available. So at the moment, it's probably a little easier to find people. Although when you're looking for really great talent and the best people, you pretty much always have to go and hunt for it rather than actually rely on kind of adverts or inbound. So we'll use like a comprehensive market strategy, a bit like most people will do, which includes your own network, your own database, all your tools online like LinkedIn, all your job boards. You will advertise. I think a lot of it is we've got a really experienced team as well. So the 3 founders have all got roughly 20 years experience each. We've got a lady working for us who's got more experience than any of us. And then even our delivery team who you wouldn't call them juniors at all because one of them's got 10 years experience. So we have built up incredibly strong networks of good quality people. But it depends because we're recruiting in different parts of the world at the moment as well. Mm-hmm. So you have to build new networks in those areas as well. So that's actually a bit more of a headhunt type approach. Map the companies that would be relevant for what you're looking for, map the technologies, and actually just go and approach people and put a lot of hard work in.
I got you. And that's something we swear by. And the more people we speak with, they agree. It's like, who you know is everything. Knowing people in real life, networking, that kind of thing. And it's all about having good relationships, good quality relationships, people where you can just drop them a text and be like, oh, I've seen you doing this, or whatever. Yeah. And that was, I was thinking about marketing methods. Are you using anything in particular there, or does anything even compare to just knowing the right people?
What, in terms of marketing for candidates or for new customers?
You know what?
Or both? Yeah.
Both.
So my view on marketing is we've got 3 kind of target markets. One's prospective employees, one's candidates, and one's clients. So in a way, the message to all 3 could be slightly different as well. We're still a fairly small business as well, so cost comes into it a little bit as well, and sales and marketing, in my mind, are inherently linked as well. So, what do we do? We do a lot. I do a lot on social, so I do a lot on LinkedIn. We do a lot of events. We run webinars, roundtables. We do bigger events where we partner with other people. We run a podcast ourselves, or my colleague does. And then we don't really use what I'd call drip campaigns or like your classic kind of email type ones. We do a fair bit of direct kind of outreach. And we will go to other people's events as well. But I think if you look at our kind of strategy, really, we're trying to get in the room with decision makers to have credible conversations. Mm-hmm. My view is that most people buy based on trust. And whether that's they trust the brand or they trust the individual, at a smaller business level, it's usually they trust the individual. Mm-hmm. And if it's a larger organisation, I don't know, you go McDonald's or something, and you go to a new country and you're not quite sure where you go. We go, well, at least if I go to McDonald's, it'll be the same as where it is. And okay, we could say that's a bit boring or what have you, but it's just the way that your mind works, right? Because you trust that brand, that there is a level of something in there.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting because I have a very similar view. I think whether it's doing outreach, so outbound or marketing, which it really just increases your inbounds, right? And it doesn't matter which one, as long as person and you become pals or business contacts, or you can be in a position where you can talk to each other, well, that's it. It's just, can we do business or not? And it really doesn't matter how you get to that point. It's just what's most effective for you. And for that reason, I find, again, well, podcasting is great for that sort of top of funnel thing, isn't it? But also it puts me and you in a room like this, so there's a very good chance after this I'll probably be able to drop you a text if I need something, and you'll probably go, oh, it's Joe, we've spoke already, I know him, and it's it's just good from that point. So it's really just how do you get to that point with people that you want to do business with?
100%. And it's, I agree with you there. And it takes time to build up that trust. And also you need to make sure that your product or service is a good quality one, reputable at the,
people always forget that part, don't they?
Exactly. But it is, I do agree with you fundamentally that that's maybe the hard part. I think that recruitment's is known for being a very sales-focused industry. And, when I first started, it was very much phone-based. We had very hardcore stats. You used to have to make 300 outbound calls a day. You need to be on the phone for at least an hour a day. And it was micromanaged and quite prescribed. I'm not saying that was necessarily a bad thing, because actually you did learn to cut your teeth in an environment that was hard. And actually, if you could get through it, you probably would be successful. I think the world has changed a little bit, and actually now it's kind of decision makers within business use just different tools as well. And so I think you have to have much more of a multi-channel kind of approach, multi-touch point kind of approach these days. And it is a little bit more complicated than it used to be. I think one of the pitfalls I've definitely seen across the industry is that a lot of people hide behind emails and just send emails, expect people to answer them, and can end up spamming or even just sending out lots of direct emails that aren't particularly spam ones. They could be well-crafted ones, but they just don't get response rates off them. So I think the best salespeople find a way, and often they'll find a way that's maybe slightly different to somebody else. But they find a way to get in the room with somebody who is a decision maker, build rapport, build the trust. And as long as they're reasonably likable, have a good product or service, often get the sale.
Do you know what? It means everything, doesn't it, to have that trust built? We've done it before where you might have had like 20-page long sort of email thread going on with someone, and then, orchestrating a project or whatever, and you don't really get a vibe from them. You've never met them in the flesh, and then you finally meet when you start a project, and you're like, and you get along great. All of a sudden, there's this, rapport, and it's like, I get you, and it's all's good, and happy days from there. It's crazy how much weight it holds. To know people.
Yeah, I'm a bit old school, but I'm a massive believer of face to face. We run our business like that as well, so we're in office most of the time as well.
Especially with AI, the better AI gets, the more important face-to-face is. It becomes the only thing which is like, you can't fudge it, you can't hide. You can get the most elaborate email sequence, outreach this, blah, 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 content that. For all we know, in a year from now, anyone, any idiot, can have the most elaborate marketing campaign with the click of a button.
It's an interesting point. I've not really thought about that too much, although I do think about AI quite a lot. But it is an interesting point, and I agree with you. I think, yes, it is interesting because, to your point, you could definitely come up with an amazing marketing campaign, really well-crafted emails. Not that they are particularly well at the moment by most bits of AI kit, and I have tried a number. But yeah, it will get to a point where they are. But And then actually, when you meet somebody, you'll realise that it isn't their personality. And I do wonder whether that will encourage more people to go back to kind of face-to-face.
I think it will, because it's just going to have no value to it. Do you remember once upon a time when we talk about when we had our first studio and we had an Xbox there and like 3 DVDs. We had Indiana Jones Last Crusade. We had Harry Potter Prisoner of Azkaban. One other. And it was like, which one are we going to watch? And it would, I think it was Braveheart actually. It was those 3, and you were always in the mood for one of them because those were your options. And now you can scroll past an amazing new TV show on Netflix and you just don't care because there's too many of them. It's the same thing. AI is really just eating it all and putting zero value on all of it.
Yeah, it's interesting listening to you there, and it's interesting thinking about why people are interested in listening to podcasts more at the moment, and longer for video and actually, I think possibly it's a bit of that cutting through the noise piece, isn't it? And actually going, well, it's going to be. I'm saying it's hard to do an AI kind of podcast. Maybe,
Oh no, they exist now, but it doesn't hold any emotional weight. You just your brain knows that's not two people talking.
Interesting.
So you switch off.
Yeah, I might have to check one of those out. I've not come across that, but I think it's maybe why the popularity of kind of podcasts and other stuff are on the rise. Because I agree with you on the Netflix piece. It's like, actually, what are you going to choose? You've got limited time, and you've got an algorithm just spitting stuff out going, this is what we recommend for you. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, you mentioned how market and sales go together. And I'm always curious, I guess in something like recruitment, where it's something people need, so it's a matter of how do you get people to use you? Sales are possible because, well, people need it. How do you make sure they use your service? What I'm selling, I think in many ways is not strictly a need. People could choose to use a different kind of content.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's an interesting question. I mean, whether you know it or not, the UK recruitment market is pretty much the most mature in the world. You could definitely call it saturated. I think on the latest data, and I could be wrong on it, but there are over 30,000 recruitment companies in the UK. I believe there's more in London than there are in the whole of the US. Right?
Oh, right.
So whilst there is a need for it, doesn't mean that they're going to pick you. And it doesn't mean, especially when there's a lot of candidates available, that they're even going to use an agency in the first point. So I think, again, kind of going back to some of the fundamental stuff that we've talked about, number one, being very good at what you do. Actually, when you do get a chance, you need to actually fill the role. You need to be very credible with the customer. You need to treat candidates really well, and actually enhance their kind of brand in the process of it as well.
So no longer just here's your CV.
Yeah, so you need, very much so. You need to move away. This is again my opinion. You need to move away from transactional to more transformational with it, and actually provide a higher value service. Number one, that is actually making sure you find the right candidate for the role. And I do think in the last couple of years that there has been a movement towards kind of value-added services around it, which I'm not like quashing and saying that we shouldn't have, because there definitely should be some value-added piece around it. But actually fundamentally being paid to fill the position for them, that's the kind of burning platform. You and I, business owners, we've got, if we've got a problem in our team and we need somebody in quickly, we would pay the money if it's going to solve a problem for us. And that's where it kind of comes from. So fundamentally, you need to be really good at that. You probably do need to be in a niche. Generalists are struggling a little bit. You could argue that IT isn't even really a niche anymore. You could go much more niche than that, but or IT or technology. And then you need to be known. People need to know and trust you to use you, especially in a mature market. Going back to yours when you're saying, do people even need it? It's a different sell perhaps. And actually in some ways, the coaching services that we provide is a little bit like that as well. So there are times when people could really do with coaching, and it could be a burning platform type piece. A bit like me when I took my MD role for the first time. I was like, right, my head's on fire a little bit. I'm like, right, I need some help. I'm looking around. I'm actively looking at that point. But there could be times when it's a bit more aspirational, where you're thinking, well, I'd like to be an MD in the future. How do I improve myself? Actually, what can I do to actually learn, improve, become better? So it's a different kind of piece. And then that's probably then drives how you kind of position yourself from a marketing perspective, the type of material, thought leadership, kind of hooks that you'll throw out there, and also the sales process. So the sales process for coaching I find very different to recruitment. But ultimately with both, I like to be at the front end of it where possible. So I like to have, where possible, we'd like to have somebody, a decision maker that's got trust in us before they're even thinking about making recruitment decisions and before they're even thinking about coaching things. It's not always possible, but that's, if you can, that's kind of the ultimate.
The great juggle, the great balance.
Yeah.
Well, like you said, with there being so many recruitment agencies in the UK, once you've found some great candidate, how do you make sure to stay with you if they know that there's so many other options out there?
Is that a candidate that you'd be placing with a company or somebody who would work for us?
Oh, I have someone who you'd be placing for a company. Do you know what? Both. Honestly, both.
I think...
Same thing, actually, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I think ultimately you can't... It's very hard to get somebody to work exclusively with you as a candidate. I know in certain markets it's probably a little bit more possible. So I know, for example, in finance recruitment, there are... it's quite a candidate-driven market, and actually recruiters will have multiple different jobs. So often, if you work closely with a trusted recruiter, they will probably be able to give you 10 options for your next role. So in that market, it happens a bit more. I'd say in our market, that happens less, unless you're very niche in an area. So. And that's not necessarily a problem. Actually, the hardest bit is actually having the jobs in the first place from the customers. So if you've got the jobs, the candidates will work with you in the market at the moment. So I don't think that's necessarily as big an issue. I think, having said that, we really believe in treating people well and candidates well. And one of the things that we've got in place that we talked about is this kind of feedback loop. So we do ask for feedback after the candidate interactions. And for clarity, what that actually means is if you were a candidate, so we put you forward for a role, after you've either been accepted or rejected, we'd ask you for feedback during that kind of process. And then we collate all that feedback and then look to improve on it as well. So we're looking to treat candidates really well so that they do recommend us, come back to us, and that kind of drives, and that does drive good business. It really does. But ultimately, if somebody else has got a job in a different recruitment company that's perfect for them, they're completely free and able to go and do that, and that's the right thing for them. So so you've just got to be okay with it. Yeah,
it's funny as well because you have to not take it personally. If it's a funny one where you have to be selfish to a degree when you run a business because you have to, well, you're trying to make a living, you're doing what you do, but also you have to be very much, well, if the customer got what they want and it wasn't from me, it's job done, and you have to be okay with that.
Well, again, one of the... So it's not a throwaway line because we use it all the time. So one of the things we talk about all the time within the business is how do we leave a promoter? So actually, if you've got a tough decision to make within the business, one of the things that we use to remind people to make the right decision is how do you leave this interaction or this person as a promoter? So whether that's a candidate, a customer, or a supplier, it helps remind people to do the right thing because actually leaving them as a promoter is more important in the long term than having a short-term win.
It's so much more important to have people saying good things about you than you saying it yourself.
Yep.
Marketing, you can go forever trying to find the ultimate, slogan, this, that. It's like, well, of course you're saying you're good. But, people listen more. It's like when you go on anything on Amazon and you go straight to customer reviews. Yeah. You're curious what non-biased people have to say because we instantly go, well, that's the truth. Yeah.
And I think in the age we live with data just being available much easier than it ever has been, and it will continue to go that way, then you have to run your business that way. But also if you look at the data as well, like all of the top performing businesses in the US all have really high net promoter scores. And that's basically outside people saying that they would recommend them to somebody else. So customer service is so incredibly important in any industry, but especially in one that's a people-focused one, and actually one that, inherently has probably got a bit of a bad reputation for it as well. So you can actually beat the trend massively if you do double down on your customer service.
I like that. And on the flip side, customers. So the companies that your candidates work for, how do you retain them? How do you keep them happy? Yeah, really good question.
Again, ultimately, it's doing a good job. So an old boss says to me, you're only as good as your last placement, and it is very true. So you have to keep doing a good job for people. that's your number one, and making sure that you do. I think you can then get a little bit more tactical or strategic about it as well. So if you do have other products and services that you can offer, it does help you become a little bit more sticky with those customers as well. And actually then working in partnership with them to embed other pieces. So whether that's running events together, whether that's actually, doing podcasts or other pieces as well. But fundamentally, it's actually great customer service and actually listening to what they say. And that's one, again, we talked about it earlier, didn't we? It's like, often you don't want to hit when you've had when you haven't done so well. But actually, it's great when you get great feedback. It's brilliant. You can market it. Yeah. Right?
Well, ChatGPT always says I had a great idea.
Yeah. But it doesn't really fundamentally tell you anything about your service. It's like, it's a nice little pat on the back, but it's not changing anything. The things that change something is actually when you get a bit of bad feedback or even good constructive feedback, and then you actually need to act on it and do it. And so I think we've tried to make sure that we've got a lot of feedback loops going through on that. We can always do better, and there's something that we're working on at the moment to make it better. But I think it's getting that feedback from your customers, actually implementing the changes that you need to.
Final thing I want to talk about, so future trends.
Yeah.
I wake up every day thinking, is today the day? Has AI taken away my job?
Recruitment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you know what? All of them. Recruitment, consulting.
Yeah, everything. We could probably talk for an hour about this. We had a webinar recently that was called The Power of Human Connection, and it was on kind of AI in coaching, consulting, leading teams as well. Had some really interesting discussions around it. Again, where we see it at the moment, so AI is in recruitment. You'll have had conversations with other people about this, and there are so many kind of rec tech companies actually sprouting up all over the place, I suppose, trying to win the game of getting that kind of AI unicorn in recruitment that would take us all out of the market. From what I've seen so far, there's one or two good things happening around the candidate sourcing side of things. Actually, from finding candidates in the first place, there's a number of companies. I've been involved in a few. I won't name them. I've been under NDAs on a couple, but like in studies around some of the forward-facing bits of it as well, in terms of kind of outreach. And there's some interesting pieces out there, and they are making some moves in it. But where we're at the moment, I still think that it's very much a human game, and a bit to our point that we were talking about kind of 5-10 minutes ago, people like to deal with people at a human level, especially when they're looking to hire other people.
So you think we'll get to a point where it's like, there is a tool for this, but we'll reject it?
I don't know. And look, I'm old now, and I've been in the game for a long time, and actually user adoption of this, from the younger generation might be massive, and it might be kind of my old set in my ways type things of rejecting it a little bit. But I think where we'll probably get to at the moment is recruiters who are using AI effectively will beat recruiters who aren't. There will be companies who use some AI. I think there might be a mass market that uses AI for kind of high volume pieces of work, but actually for their kind of critical hires, and also for certain personality types, there will always be a place for people who are seen as like your real specialist kind of crafts people at the top end. But I could be wrong. And like next year, we could all be out of jobs.
I've seen, I can't recall his name, the guy who founded LinkedIn. He's made a prediction about this. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't. No.
He reckons in about 10 years, so much work now will just be so cheap. And he listed there's a huge list of different industries, and it's like, it'll be pennies to the point where people don't really have to work anymore. Yeah. And I thought that's a bold prediction. A part of me is terrified. A part of me is like, that actually sounds quite nice. Let's see. Yeah. Can you imagine if you get to run around just doing the stuff you want to do?
Well, exactly. And we had a bit of this conversation on it as well on the last webinar we did. Is, you know, if it goes to this kind of world where AI is running everything, is it going to go kind of dystopia in one side, and actually the human race kind of dying out, and there's all, you know, it's a bit Terminator type stuff, or will it actually be a bit like you said, where, you know, we don't have to work, and actually we get to spend more time doing things that we enjoy doing, and actually there's a higher quality of life.
It's the balance between higher quality of life, not having to slave, because I mean, I don't know if it's strictly a UK thing at the minute, but it really is grind, minimal reward at the minute. But then if you get to a point where you don't have to do anything, you know, people do get a lot of purpose and fulfillment from the jobs. So it'd be finding that balance. That'd be a tough one.
I find it fascinating. Where it will go.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. My own view at the moment, I think it probably won't go there as quickly as we think. But I could be massively wrong.
Yeah, possibly. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll watch this one back in 10 years and we'll leave a comment. That's all right, we'll call it there, James. I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much.
No, thanks for having me. Cheers, sir.